My name is Eva Woodward Parker, and I'm the youngest child of Lysander Woodward and Piana Axford Simpson, both pioneer settlers of Rochester. My father, Lysander Woodward, was determined to leave his home in western New York in 1838 for the opportunities in Michigan. He married my mother and bought land on the north side of Rochester, where he built our family home in 1845. I'm given to understand that the home still stands today on the west side of North Main Street. Now, I was one of 5 children and spent my youth in an atmosphere of considerable privilege. See, my father owned vast parcels of land and farmed them to great advantage. My father also helped bring the railroad to Rochester, which raised the fortunes of all, and he served as the first president of the rail line. As a result of my father's success, I was fortunate to live well, to be educated, and to travel widely. After completing common school education, I did attend high school in Pontiac and graduated in 1877. I continued my studies at the University of Michigan until 1879, where I studied Latin in the pursuit of a philosophy degree. For a short time later, I did serve as a teacher in the public schools, but I was soon very distracted. You see, during my studies at U of M, I met a young man. His name is Arthur Parker, and he was a pharmacy student. It would be unladylike to repeat all of the details. After an acceptable time keeping company with Arthur, we did marry in 1883. Arthur quickly became a businessman, and a successful one too. My Arthur founded the Detroit Drug Company, which quickly grew to a pharmacy store chain in the city of Detroit. Later on, Arthur joined Park Davis Company as a representative. Arthur and I maintained a fine home in Detroit, befitting a man of his business stature, but we loved to spend our holidays and summers at the Rochester homestead. Upon the death of my parents, my sister Emma and I did inherit the farm and house, and we all made good use of it as a summer home. Arthur was an amateur horticulturist. He loved working in the gardens. He even cultivated a number of award-winning plants. Eventually, Arthur and I built a home next door to the family house, and we lived there while John and Emma lived in the old house. We were all happy and resided there for the rest of our lives. John, Emma, and Arthur passed within a short time, and I was the only one left. I moved back into the old house and took my housekeeper of many years, Miss Mary Walters, with me. Mary was also without family, and I was concerned for her well-being, as she was an elderly Negro woman, virtually alone in our community, although people of Rochester did love her. When the time came for me to make a will, I directed that Mary be allowed to live the rest of her days in the Woodward house, and that my estate would be used to support her for the remainder of her life. It was of primary importance to me that Mary was cared for as she had cared for Arthur and I. I also had another strong desire, and that was to provide a proper public library building for the people of Rochester and Avon Township. So the remaining funds of my estate, after Mary passed, were to be used for the construction of a new library. My wishes were carried out in 1951 when the Woodward Memorial Library was constructed on the corner of West 5th and Pine Street. I'm given to understand the library has grown and thrived since then, and has even moved to a larger building that is a monument of self-education. But the old building still stands today. I hope that all of you are members of the library, as it is the most important resource a community can give its citizens. Within its walls, you will find the knowledge of the ages, freely available for all to partake. I beg you to take advantage of it to its fullest. And now, I know there are others here to tell their stories, so I bid you a good afternoon.
Please come in, everyone, and gather round. I am Miss Eva Barwise, and I'm pleased to greet you here today. I am the daughter of the pioneers of this section. My father, Isaac Barwise, was an Englishman. In his 24th year, he left England behind and traveled to the New World and settled in Avon Township, where he commenced to farm. Later on, he moved to California during the gold rush years and set himself to mining. Having made sufficient money at it, he returned to Avon to buy more good farmland. Having thus staked himself, he married my mother, Jane Underwood, in 1862, and I was born the following year. The location of my parents' farm was at the northeast corner of Rochester and Tinkin Road. Much later on, it became the location of what you might have known as the National Twist, Drill and Tool Company, but in our day, it was a fine farm with many head of cattle and sheep. For my part, I took to my studies with serious intent. My mother, Jane Underwood, had a similar devotion to learning and attended the normal school at Ypsilanti. She was the village teacher at the village school of Rochester for about 10 years before her marriage. I too was to follow in her footsteps, and after being graduated at the high school of Pontiac, I too became a school teacher. I followed this vocation for a number of years until my father was widowed and left to manage the household on his own. At the time, I became his housekeeper and caretaker, seeing to all his needs until his death in 1917. It was always my personal strong belief that personal education and betterment should be a lifelong vocation. To this end, I read as widely as possible and traveled whenever opportunity was laid before me. It was my great joy in 1925 to travel to France and England, the land of my father's forebears. Here at home, I became a member of the Rochester's Women's Club, where I influenced the ladies of that organization to continue in their efforts to organize a public library for the betterment of our entire community. In 1922, we organized a small lending library for our citizens and campaigned for the passage of a tax to support a more official library. In 1924, when it passed, we officially opened the public library and employed a paid librarian, Miss Florence Comstock. At the time, the library was housed in rented quarters, and I often had conversations with Miss Eva Barker, another member of our organization, about finding a more permanent building to accommodate the library. We were still talking about it at the time that I passed from this earth. Wonder, did they ever accomplish it? Well, it's likely you've heard as much of my story as might interest you, but while you're here, I invite you to enjoy this lovely mausoleum. It was built in 1925 by the Flowers Mausoleum Company of Toledo, Ohio. The company's representatives came to town in 1924 with plans to build this repository and asked for subscriptions from the community to fund it. I found it a most pleasing plan and purchased 4 crypts for the use of my family. My brother John was one of the first to be entombed here, and I arranged later for my mother and father to be moved here as well. Well, I hope you've enjoyed your visit here today, and I invite you to come again.
Good afternoon, friends and neighbors. I'm given to understand you're curious to know the facts of my life, and I shall be happy to oblige one and all. My name is Polly Granger Pixley. I was born in 1803 in the township and county of Tioga in the state of New York. When I was of age, I married a man from the same community named Jonathan Pixley, and we settled in Monroe County, western New York. It was from there, in 1831, that our family decided to emigrate to the Michigan Territory, in company with my husband's brother David. We commenced our journey with a 3-day passage on the Erie Canal to Buffalo, where we shipped aboard the steamer William Penn. After a very rough voyage, we arrived in Detroit and put up at the old Yankee boarding house. The house was packed full of emigrants, all sleeping on the floor, and such a snarling among the children we never heard before. Well, after a night's rest, Jonathan bought a yoke of oxen for $65 and hitched it to a wagon. We loaded our family and goods on board and started for Oakland. But the mud was hub deep, and my Jonathan had to walk next to the oxen's heads, for he did not know what a caper they might cut up. We came to what was called the 4 Mile House that first night, but just before reaching this place we had to drive over a large whitewood tree that had fallen across the road. We knew that the oxen could not jump over the log while still attached to the wagon, so driving as near as he could, Jonathan unhitched them and made them jump over. Then, hitching the chain to the end of the tongue of the wagon, soon pulled it over. We stayed at the 4 Mile House all that night, and but little sleep did we get, for the mosquitoes were dying to have one's fill. The next morning the landlord came and told us that there was a man who wished to see Jonathan. Well, he hurried out, and behold, it was Linus Cone. He had arrived sometime in the night on his way to Detroit. The landlord told him that there was an emigrant there who was moving to Rochester. Cone wished to bring back a load of goods, and wanted 50 cents per 100. We thought this a big price, but Mr. Cone said we would not think so by the time we got there. Well, Jonathan gave him an order for our goods, and just made up his mind that it was cheap enough. Well, we started out again soon the next morning after breakfast, with 2 or 3 other teams in company for Royal Oak. We came late in the day to Chase's Corners on the Crooks Road, and seeing a good bite of grass, in Mr. Chase's garden, he let us turn our oxen into bait. While they ate up what there was in a hurry, we bought a bushel of potatoes and started on. Our next stopping place was at Mrs. Guy Phelps's in Troy. It being a Saturday night, we stayed until Monday morning, where we made an early start for our home. We arrived at our present home on the northeast quarter of Section 23, then the township of Oakland, now Avon, on the 24th day of May, 1831. Well, nothing occurred during the summer worthy of note until the 12th of September, when all but Jonathan were taken ill with typhoid fever. This was a great setback for us, but we had good and kind neighbors for which I shall always be thankful. Some of our neighbors were Daniel and William Bronson, Nathaniel and Augustus Baldwin, Benjamin Horton, John F. Hamlin, Judge Sprague, and Mr. Shippey. These were all in a circle of 3 or 4 miles, and as pioneers of the township, we took care of one another during hard times. Well, in conclusion, I would say, besides being very homesick the first season, I missed my husband, for he had to work out by the day for bread for our family of 8, and all of his labor to get out of debt was in vain, for at the end of the first season we were still $50 in debt. But Providence did provide, and we paid the debt the following year. Jonathan cut wood daytimes and hauled at nights, and sold it for 75 cents per cord, and store pay at that. Then we had a good farm of 150 acres free from debt. We reared a family of 13 children, and since then 7 generations of our descendants have called Rochester home. Perhaps some of you good people might know some of the Pixleys hereabouts today. And so, good neighbors, as the Queen of Sheba told King Solomon, the half has not been told, and further this deponent saith not. Others who are out and about today have plenty to say to you, however, and I invite you to pass along to Mrs. Burgess, who waits you just over yonder.
Hello everyone, and thank you for stopping by to visit me today. My name is Sarah Stafford Burgess, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my story. I was born in Ontario, Canada in 1844. I came to Michigan right before the Civil War, and I married Elisha Burgess, who was farming in Shelby Township, next county over. In 1870, we sold our farm in Shelby to my brother Christopher, and we settled here in Rochester. Our house was on West 5th Street, what you call West University Drive nowadays, on the corner of Madison Street. Our first child, Cora, was born in 1863. Then came Minnie and Howard, and last little Maudie. It's Maudie I want to tell you about today, and I'll warn you in advance that my story is not a joyful one. You see, when Maudie was a wee one, we had a problem in this sort of estate. Ruthless men would visit our cemeteries under the cover of night, and would break into the graves of the recently departed that were dwelling there. They weren't after valuables in the way that you might expect, jewelry and such. No, they wanted to rip the moral remains themselves from those graves. They would load them up into their wagons and sell them to the State University's medical department. Rumor had it in these parts that the medical school would pay $50 apiece for them, no questions asked, so long as they were less than 3 days in the ground. They wanted them for student training, you see. Cadavers, they called them. Immoral is what it was. Well, like any town that was within a night's wagon ride of Ann Arbor, Rochester was visited by these heartless ghouls. One night, the town constable even discovered a wagon parked outside of the hotel overnight that had the remains of several people in it, wrapped up under a cover. Those men were hauled away to jail, but others took their place. It was such a problem that when the more well-to-do people lost a family member, they would hire the town constable to sit out in the cemetery for 3 nights until the danger had passed and the graves were no longer in danger of being opened. It was the talk of the town for a while, and even my little Maudie was aware of it at the tender age of 4. That was when she asked me one day, "Mama, if I die, are you going to put me in the cemetery where the grave robbers can get me?" It broke my heart that my little baby would even ask such a question, and I thought only to calm her fears when I told her, "No, if that happens, we'll bury you right here in the backyard, where I can keep an eye on you from the kitchen window." Little did I know that about a week or so after I had that conversation with Maudie, she would come down sick with a lung fever, which you call pneumonia. And within a week, our little girl had gone on to heaven in her 4th year. Now, I told you my story was a sad one, and any mother that has lost a child knows the pain I felt. But I want you to understand that I was not alone in my grief in those days. You see, in the times that I lived in, the loss of a child was not an uncommon cross for a family to bear. You see, the death rate for infants and children under the age of 5 was about 25%. So if a mother had 4 children, as I did, the odds said that she would lose one of them in childhood. If you have 4 children, consider my words, and you'll begin to understand what my circumstance was like. Well, my husband Elisha and I did exactly as we promised Maudie we would do. We buried her in the backyard garden, and we kept an eye on her from the kitchen window. We hadn't the money to hire the town constable to guard her, you see, and I just couldn't bear the thought of my little baby falling prey to those horrible robbers. So we did what we could to keep her safe. And some years later, when the danger had long passed, we moved her here to the cemetery. I lost my Elisha in 1897, and I went on without him for 30 years after that. In my later years, my brother Christopher made his home with me. Eventually, I joined Elisha and my little Maudie in this peaceful place, and I still watch over her as I promised I would do all those years ago. Well, I'm sure you've all heard enough of my tale of woe, so I'll thank you again for stopping by to visit me, and I encourage you to visit my friend Mrs. Butz just down the way.
Greetings and welcome all of you who are out and about this fine day. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Catharine Emery Butz, and I was born in Northampton County, Pennsylvania, which is in the Lehigh Valley. My people came from Germany to the New World in the colonial days in search of a better life. My family name was Emmerich, but the English-speaking people around us heard Emery, so that's what our name became. When I reached the age of 21 years old, I married Elias Butz, who was a man from another German family in our valley. He spelled his name with a Z at the end in the German tradition. But after a time, the people adopted it to the English spelling B-U-T-T-S, and our children adopted that custom. If you look around at some of our family monuments of our descendants, you'll see that they have adopted that tradition. Well, although my family was from Germany, I claim a proud American heritage. My father, John Emery, was a patriot in the War for Independence. He was quite young at the time, and he served as a drummer boy in an independent company of the Pennsylvania militia. He suffered a wound at the Battle of Brandywine. Now, I'm sure you've all been studying up on your history books, as all good American children must do. So you'll know that the Battle of Brandywine is where General Washington stood to repel General Howe's men as he advanced towards Philadelphia. I'm proud to say that my father was among the troops that were under General Washington's command. Well, enough about that. Let me tell you about my family story. Elias and I started our family in Warren County, New Jersey, which wasn't very far from where we were born in Pennsylvania. Providence saw fit to bless us with 7 children, 3 girls, 4 boys. Our youngest, precious Lavina, did not survive past the age of 3 years old, but the others were blessed to grow and thrive. In 1855, we packed up our goods and family and moved westward to Michigan, where plenty of families that we knew from Northampton County were settling. Elias bought us a good, high piece of farmland up on the hill south of Rochester, and that is where we settled our homestead. Eventually, our youngest son, David, took the farm from his father, and in turn, he passed it down to his daughter, Elizabeth Butz Case. So the land stayed within our family for well over a century. Before you leave me today, I have one more event in my life I'd like to tell you about. You recall that I told you about my father's service in the War for Independence. Well, in 1890, 4 years before I myself fled this vale of tears, an organization was founded in Washington, D.C., the Society for the Daughters of the American Revolution. Well, this society was seeking out descendants of patriots of the War of Independence, and we're asking them to apply for membership. And being such a person, I applied and was accepted. A few years later, after I was laid to rest in this peaceful grove, the local society chapter put a plaque upon my monument designating me as a real daughter, which means that I was an actual daughter of a patriot of the War for Independence and a member of the DAR. It is quite an honor to have this plaque. Only 767 women throughout the nation are designated as real daughters. I'm proud to be among them. It pains my heart to say it, but thieves and vandals have visited our quiet cemetery here. One night, they came and took the plaque down from my monument and stole it away. You can see here where once it was and now is gone. It is a sorry thing to desecrate our cemeteries, and I hope all you mothers will teach your children the value of respecting our cemeteries and final resting places and our monuments. They are all that live and remain to tell our stories. Well, I've chattered on too much, I'm sure, so I urge you to go visit the Shoemaker sisters, who I'm sure are eager to see you.
Well, look at that. A lively person has come to visit us. We're so happy to see you. It's just wonderful. Please come closer. Let me introduce my sister and I. I am Anna Elizabeth Shoemaker, and this is my sister Lucy Victoria Shoemaker.
And we are both named for queens. Isn't that regal?
Lucy, it's not becoming to put on airs. Please, mind your manners.
She's an old mother hen. Have you divined that she's older than I am?
Was it necessary to share that, my dear?
Oh, psh. These people can read. They can acknowledge the dates.
Well, let me get on with the story, if you don't mind. Our parents were met and married in Warren County, New Jersey, and I was born there, and several of my siblings. Right before the war between the states, Mother and Father decided they would like to move us to Michigan, and so we came there via the Erie Canal and the overland trails, and we settled here in this section. Many people from Warren County had already come here and told us what a good place it was for opportunity. So we had many friends and acquaintances when we arrived. I was just 7 at that time.
Did I mention that Anna was the firstborn and I was the last? And altogether, there were 9 children. Our mother died after I was born of childbirth complications, so I never met her, but I do carry her Christian name.
Well, and at that point, you can imagine, I being the eldest, took care of the younger children and hopefully taught them many things, including good manners. Eventually, Father remarried, and we had another child born into the family, a little girl, Elizabeth. So we were 10 all told.
And we had cousins by the dozens. Father came from a large family, and a lot of them migrated to this area of Stony Creek Village and Rochester. I suspect that by marriage, we're related to more than half the people that you'll find right around this area.
Well, at least many of them, Lucy, many of them. And that was very good, for when I went into business, I had clients who would come to me for dresses and hats. Now, let me tell you, especially you young ladies, women in our day did not have many choices. If we did not marry, we were expected to be school teachers, and I wanted no part of the classroom. I was not suited for that kind of a career. But I was good with needle and thread, and over time developed an eye for fashionable design.
Anna really was very, very talented. She could take a bolt of ordinary cloth and turn it into something spectacular. And ladies would have had to go to Detroit for their fancy dress goods. And you know, that was the whole day's trip down and back. So they were happy to have our store. Plus, Anna employed a number of local ladies as seamstresses, and she also gave piecework to others when the orders came in and we needed extra help.
As soon as Lucy was of age, she became my partner in the business, and the years passed. We worked very diligently, but we were never part of that Main Street fraternity.
No, they were all men.
Let me tell you, the women, even though we were in the minority, we could not vote, we could not sit on the city council, but we were not without power. Ladies of Rochester visited our rooms quite often and hid no secrets from us.
We knew their dress sizes.
Not exactly my point, Lucy. These women, our clients, were the mothers and wives of the leaders of this town, and they were proud to share the information with us.
Well, you know, Anna, there is a saying. When men get together over their beer and cigars, they gossip. When women get together in the dress shop, they exchange information.
Well, we're also very trustworthy, very responsible, and that too helped to build our successful business reputation.
Yes, and it was a good reputation. Business was very good. In fact, we were able to build our own house and move our business there. And I understand the house may still exist on the southwest corner of 2nd and Walnut Street.
How gratifying that is. This tiny, tiny village that we came to from New Jersey here to the Michigan, the brand new state of Michigan, really. It was small. There was a gravel main street through Rochester. The sidewalks were plank wood sidewalks. It has changed so much and become such a center of commerce and industry. Even before we departed this world, we could see a good future. I left in 1947, and Lucy departed in 1951. We had had a wonderful life here, and it was a wonderful place to live.
She always had to be first. But really, we've so much enjoyed talking with you, and I hope now you're going to go on and meet our friend, Mrs. Barwise. But, you know, please come back and talk with us. We love to have company. And before you go, I want to give you one of our business cards, just in case you need some fancy goods or dressmaking.
And all of you were just such a breath of fresh air to us.
Yes, thank you for coming.